Tuning into our mini course for Career.Set.Go. Our first course is about what makes a great federal resume. So let's get started. So here we're going to discuss the differences really quickly between a federal resume and a private sector resume. Just some short snippets. A private resume is normally 2 to 3 pages in length. A federal resume is normally 3 to 7 pages in length, depending on your background. Now, the private resume is just a short overview of your work experience and your accomplishments and any other things you choose to highlight in your resume, your professional summary, your skills. However, the federal resume is that and so much more, because the federal resume requires much more detail, because this detail has to show your knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job, as well as all duties and accomplishments throughout your work history, your entire work history, as a matter of fact. And also, in preparing the federal resume, it's important that you tweak and update your resume as many times as necessary, depending on the job that you're applying for. So anytime you apply for a different job, you have to update your resume. You cannot apply for an administrative position if your resume still reflects work experience of a cashier. So always update your resume. And also, private resumes are written with small paragraphs, and normally the bullet points are used to highlight your major accomplishments. That's what I do when I write my resumes. Other recruiters or other consultants may do theirs differently. Federal resumes have paragraphs that highlight each major skill as it pertains to that particular job. Also, private resumes don't put too much emphasis on keywords, because in the private resume, you're normally going to highlight your skills that shows that you are a great candidate for the job that the employer is advertising for. Keywords aren't really necessary unless you're trying to show your strengths and your accomplishments, but that's not a necessary factor when applying for the positions in the private sector industry. However, keywords are necessary when you are applying for your federal government positions, because there are so many applicants that apply to different various federal agencies that they use the applicant tracking system. And what the system does, it picks up keywords in your resume to move you on to the next phase of the hiring process. And this is known throughout the whole federal selection process. And the applicant tracking system that is primarily used, but not the only one used, is USA Jobs. Let's move on to the next slide. Attention to detail. I have had so many resumes that have had spelling errors, grammatical errors. I'm using words out of context. So please make sure that your resume is free of misspellings and that you're using that there are no grammatical errors. Also, do not include a job description in your resume, but you want to include strong descriptions and highlight your relevant skills and accomplishments that you've used to complete those tasks or those assignments within your job. Also, you are creating this resume with the hopes and the anticipation of the job that you are applying for, and only that specific job. You will not believe that I've had people come to me and tell me that it is the recruiter's job to make the interpretation and to assume that the applicant has the relevant skills. It's not the recruiter's job. It's the recruiter's job to screen your resume to see if you meet the minimum skills and qualifications and pass you on to the next phase. The recruiters do not make the interpretation and the assumption that you have the skills that matches the job that you're applying for if it is not reflected in your resume. It's not the recruiter's job. They'll make their job harder, because they will pass right over your resume, and then you've missed that opportunity. So, action words are very important. You don't want to be the candidate that gets into a position or that applies for a position, you haven't gotten there yet, and show no type of action in your resume. And I say that because candidates would list their job duties, but you won't show action as to what you've done in that particular job. For example, did you help revise office policies? Did you create a process that helped your work functions go more smoothly? So employers want to see that you're just not sitting in a job for the sake of being in one, but you're actually making a difference in that position, that you're actually getting recognized for your hard work, that you're actually adding and contributing to the organization versus being there and getting a paycheck. Do you work well with others? What are your strengths? What are your skills? What have you gained in the position? You want to use those action words to show that you are constantly learning, constantly growing, and constantly developing in your current position. And if you are not, you should not be in that position. So here are just some words that will help you get started or just give you an idea of the type of language you should have in your resume. Now, you may not have these words verbatim, and it's okay, but you want to show some type of action other than just a plain description in your resume. That bores employers, and it does not make you stand out among the next candidate in competition. Volunteer. Volunteer work is important, especially for those high school students, especially for those college graduates who do not have a lot of work experience. This actually applies to you. Now, in applying for federal government positions, they actually count your volunteer work as actual real work experience, because it is. And it also shows employers that you are well-rounded. You're just not in college or in high school taking courses. You're actually out in the community. You're being involved. You're networking. You're meeting people. It shows leadership skills. It shows that you're well-rounded. And even to those individuals that are in their entry-level career, mid-level career, senior-level career, it shows that you are just not your job. You're involved in other things outside of your job, and it looks really good to employers. So if you have volunteer experience, make sure you list that on your resume. That's very important. Congratulations. You have accomplishments. You've been working hard. However, this is not reflected in your resume. Brag about yourself. Talk about how your certificates. Talk about how you've received commendations from your colleagues at work because you resolved a difficult problem, or you came up with a work function that benefited the entire office or your staff. Talk about how you've trained others. You created a training manual. Brag about yourself. Your resume is the time to brag about yourself. Put it on paper. Not just list what jobs that you have, but what did you do in that job? You are in your position to make it better. That's what I tell my clients. That's what I tell my students. You are there for a reason. So you just don't want to be the average mediocre candidate that's applying for a job and just, working jobs for years and years and years. But the problem is you're not learning, growing, or developing. So here, if you've taken classes, if you've learned a new skill, if you've maybe even helped another colleague, or you went on a detail, this is the section where you want to list that. Your accomplishments, your accolades. Every single resume should have some type of accomplishments or accolades. Now, it doesn't have to be a long laundry list of accolades, but you want to show progress. You want to show that you're still learning, you're growing, and you're developing. You're not just putting words on paper and calling it a resume. You want to work with purpose and achievement. And you want to show your employer that, hey, if you hire me, this is what I've been doing throughout the years. This is what I've done in my last job. So this is also what I bring to your organization to offer you, because you're showing them without telling them that you are very valuable. You're a valuable employee. So this will conclude